Welcome to Nocturnal Tales. Tonight, we travel to Bologna in November 1920, where rival political factions fill the Piazza Maggiore. A newly elected council prepares to take power, and Poirot receives a warning that someone will die when the palace clock strikes noon. The 12th stroke is a mystery of false identities, manipulated violence, political fear, and one man's attempt to ensure that when the shooting begins, the lie survives longer than the truth. As always, this tale is inspired by the spirit of the great Golden Age crime writers. But the plot, characters, and text you're about to hear are entirely our own creation, though the historical epilogue at the end draws upon the real Palazzo da Curzio massacre and the political violence that engulfed Bologna in 1920. And if tonight's mystery leaves you wanting more, our complete library, 232 full-length mysteries, is free on our own website, with no adverts and no account. The link is in the description. Now settle in as the bells begin to count toward noon. A wounded man appears with a revolver in his hand, and Poirot enters a palace in which nearly everyone has been given a reason to fire first. Chapter 1. 11 minutes to noon. 11:49 a.m. There are cities which appear to have been built for beauty, and others which seem designed for conspiracy. Bologna, on that grey Sunday morning in November 1920, managed both. The arcades were crowded despite the cold. Men stood beneath the red brick arches in tight, watchful groups, their hats pulled low and their hands buried in their coat pockets. Red flags hung from several windows. Across the Piazza Maggiore, nearer the cafes, other men wore black shirts beneath their jackets and looked at the flags with expressions of quiet hatred. Between them stood lines of soldiers. I glanced at Poirot. Cheerful place. He adjusted his gloves. It is not the place that lacks cheerfulness, Hastings. It is the hour. The bells of San Petronio had not yet struck noon. In 11 minutes, the newly elected Socialist council would formally take possession of the Palazzo da Curzio. Half Bologna appeared determined to celebrate. The other half appeared equally determined that no celebration should occur. We had arrived in the city the previous evening, summoned by Signor Carlo Belandi, a wealthy silk merchant who had received 3 anonymous letters threatening his life. Belandi had promised to meet us at 11:30 beneath the statue of Neptune. He had not come. "You think the letters were genuine?" I asked. Poirot did not answer. His eyes moved across the square. A woman in a dark green coat stood beneath the arcade opposite us. She was perhaps 30, striking rather than beautiful, with pale skin and black hair drawn tightly beneath a small hat. She had been watching us for several minutes. When Poirot looked directly at her, she turned away. "Do you know her?" I asked. "No." "Then why is she staring?" "Perhaps, mon ami, it is you who have conquered her heart." I began to reply, but the woman had moved. She slipped through the crowd toward the palace. Poirot looked at his watch. 11:51 a.m. A roar went up from the western end of the square. The crowd surged toward the Palazzo da Curzio, waving red banners and shouting for the new mayor. Mounted police forced their horses sideways, pressing the front ranks back. From somewhere near the fountain came a sharp crack. I flinched. "A shot?" "A firework," said Poirot. A moment later, smoke drifted above the heads of the crowd, and several men laughed. Yet one of the soldiers did not laugh. He stared toward the arcade where the sound had originated, his rifle raised slightly. "Belandi should be here," I said. "Yes." "Perhaps he was delayed." "Perhaps?" Poirot's voice had changed. He was no longer merely waiting, he was counting. Across the piazza, a stout man in a fur-collared coat pushed toward us, breathing heavily. "Monsieur Poirot?" "Yes?" The man seized his arm. "You must not enter the palace." His face was slick with perspiration. One lens of his spectacles had cracked, leaving a white line across his right eye. "Who are you?" I demanded. He looked over his shoulder. "My name is Ricci, Professor Alessandro Ricci. I was sent by Belandi." "Where is he?" Poirot asked. Ricci swallowed. "He is inside." "Why?" "I do not know. He telephoned me at 10. He said he had made a mistake. He said the letters were not threats." What were they? Ricci's lips trembled. A warning. The crowd roared again. On the balcony above the palace entrance, 2 municipal officials appeared, and a vast red flag began to rise behind them. Professor Ricci gripped Poirot more tightly. "At noon," he whispered, "someone will die." 11:54 a.m. A group of Blackshirts emerged from the Via Rizzoli. There could not have been more than 20, but the crowd reacted as though an army had entered the square. Socialist stewards linked arms before the palace steps. Soldiers moved between the rival groups. Insults were exchanged, not shouted wildly, but delivered with the cold precision of challenges. One of the Blackshirts raised his hand. The others stopped. He was tall, fair-haired, and surprisingly young. A scar ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. His gaze passed over the soldiers, the flags, and the palace windows before resting briefly upon Professor Ricci. Ricci went white. "You know him?" I asked. "No." It was a poor lie. The young man smiled, not at Ricci, at Poirot. Then he disappeared beneath the arcade. Poirot turned to the professor. "Who is he?" "I have never seen him." "You have seen him?" "No." Poirot stepped closer. "Professor, there are 6 minutes until noon. You may spend them lying to me, but you will not enjoy what follows." Ricci's eyes filled with terror. Before he could speak, a boy came running from the palace. He wore a municipal messenger's cap and carried a folded note. "For Monsieur Poirot." Poirot opened it. I read over his shoulder. "The first shot will come from inside." There was no signature. "Belandi?" I asked. Poirot examined the paper. "No." "How can you tell?" "He writes with his right hand." This was written with the left. Professor Ricci stepped back. "I must go." I caught his sleeve. "You are going nowhere." The professor struck my hand aside with surprising violence. At that instant a bell began ringing inside the palace. Once, twice, 3 times. The formal sitting was about to begin. Ricci turned and ran. 11:56 a.m. We followed him into the Palazzo da Curzio. The entrance hall was a chaos of councillors, clerks, policemen, and party officials. Men hurried up the broad staircase beneath frescoed ceilings, while guards attempted to inspect passes that no one seemed willing to show. Ricci vanished among them. Poirot stopped. "We have lost him." "Not yet." I pushed forward, but Poirot caught my arm. "Hastings, look." At the foot of the staircase lay a black leather glove. It was small, a woman's glove. A thin smear of fresh blood marked the wrist. The woman in the green coat stood on the first landing above us. She was no longer watching Poirot. She was watching a closed door at the far end of the gallery. When she saw the glove in his hand, she shook her head once. A warning. Then the door behind her opened. Carlo Belandi emerged. I recognized him from the photograph he had sent us, a heavy, dignified man with silver hair and a carefully trimmed beard. Now his collar was torn. Blood ran from his forehead. In his right hand he held a revolver. The woman stepped away from him. Belandi looked down at Poirot. "Too late," he said. From the square outside came a rising chant. The palace clock began to strike 12. At the first stroke, every face in the hall turned upward. At the second, Belandi raised the revolver. At the third, the lights went out. Someone screamed. And in the darkness above us, a pistol fired. Chapter 2. The fourth stroke. 12:03 p.m. The pistol shot inside the darkened palace was followed by a sound far worse. From the square came an answering volley. Glass shattered above us. Bullets struck the stone facade with a series of hard, flat cracks. Men shouted. Someone fell against me, driving me into the wall, and a woman's scream rose sharply before being swallowed by the roar of the crowd outside. Then the palace clock struck 4. Poirot. "I am here, Hastings." His voice came from somewhere near my knees. A second shot exploded from the gallery. This time I saw the flash. It came from the far end of the landing, not from where Belandi had been standing, but near the closed door the woman in green had watched. Poirot's hand closed around my wrist. "Down." We dropped as another bullet tore through the plaster behind us. The main doors burst inward. People from the square flooded into the entrance hall, some seeking shelter, others carrying sticks, banners, and revolvers. In the darkness, no one could distinguish officials from intruders. The guards shouted contradictory orders. A rifle discharged at close range, and for one dreadful instant, my ears heard nothing but a dull, metallic ringing. The clock struck 5. A body came rolling down the staircase. It struck the lowest step and stopped at Poirot's feet. Professor Ricci lay on his back, his cracked spectacles still clinging to one ear. There was blood on his shirt, but I could not see where he had been wounded. Poirot bent over him. "Alive," he said. "Help me." We dragged the professor behind one of the great stone pillars. Ricci's eyes opened. "Belandi," he gasped. "Where?" Poirot asked. "The chamber." "What chamber?" But Ricci's head fell sideways. The clock struck 6. The electric lights flickered once, returned weakly, then burned at full strength. The entrance hall seemed to have transformed into a battlefield. Men crouched behind benches and pillars. A municipal clerk lay motionless beside the staircase. One of the great red banners had fallen across the floor, its lower half trampled into mud and blood. Above us, Carlo Belandi was gone. So was the woman in green. "There!" I cried. A revolver lay on the first landing. We pushed up the stairs against the stream of men coming down. A soldier attempted to stop us, but Poirot thrust aside the rifle barrel. "Signor Belandi may have been murdered." The soldier stared at him. "Everyone may have been murdered." A tremendous crash came from outside. The windows shook. Through the glass I glimpsed smoke rising near the fountain, and mounted police forcing their way through the crowd. Poirot picked up Belandi's revolver using his handkerchief. "2 chambers fired," I said. "No, 1. But we heard 2 shots upstairs." "We heard 2 shots. This weapon fired one of them." He sniffed the barrel, then examined the cylinder. "The first?" "Perhaps." We reached the door at the end of the gallery. It stood open now. Beyond it was a long council chamber with rows of wooden seats arranged before a raised platform. Half the councillors were under desks. Others crowded toward a side exit. Broken glass lay across the floor. A bullet had struck the wall behind the mayoral chair, leaving a white scar in the plaster. Belandi stood beside the central table, alive. His hands were empty. The woman in green faced him from the opposite side. Between them lay a dead man. He was young, perhaps 25, and wore the dark suit and red tie of a socialist official. A bullet had entered beneath his left eye. In his right hand, he gripped a small automatic pistol. The woman looked at Poirot. "I told him not to fire." Belandi turned on her. "You told him to wait." "Who is he?" I demanded. Neither answered. Poirot approached the body but did not touch it. "The dead man fired the second shot?" Belandi nodded. "He tried to kill me." "With his back toward you?" Belandi's face changed. The dead man had fallen between the table and the platform, his feet toward Belandi. yet the pistol remained in his right hand, pointed toward the side wall. Poirot looked at the woman. "And you, madame?" "My name is Elena Valenti." "Your glove." He produced it from his pocket. Her gaze fell upon the blood-stain. "That is not my blood." "Whose?" Before she could answer, the side door slammed open. The fair-haired black-shirt with the scar entered, accompanied by 4 armed men. Councillors scattered. Belandi backed away from the table. The young man smiled as he had smiled in the square. "Signor Belandi," he said, "you have made today unnecessarily complicated." "You were told not to come here," Belandi replied. "I was told many things." Poirot stepped between them. "And you are?" "Captain Vittorio Rinaldi." He spoke without looking at Poirot. His attention remained fixed on the corpse. "Paolo Conti," he said. "A pity." "You knew him?" I asked. "I knew what he pretended to be." Elena Valenti gave a short laugh. "No one in this room is what he pretends to be." From outside came another burst of gunfire. Rinaldi's men turned toward the windows. One of them called down to someone in the square, but the answer was lost beneath the noise. Poirot examined each face. "Signor Belandi summoned me because he received 3 letters. The letters warned that someone would die at noon. Professor Ricci claimed the danger came from inside the palace. A message then informed me that the first shot would come from inside." Rinaldi looked at Belandi. "You brought a foreign detective?" "I brought insurance." "Against whom?" Belandi said nothing. Poirot pointed toward the corpse. "This man did not fire at Signor Belandi." "You cannot know that," said Rinaldi. "I know that the bullet in the wall traveled from the side door toward the mayoral chair. Signor Belandi was not standing near the mayoral chair. He entered this room from the gallery." Elena stared at the body. "Then Paolo fired at someone else. Or someone else fired his pistol." The palace clock ceased ringing. In the sudden absence of the bells, the gunfire outside seemed closer. A municipal guard appeared in the doorway. "Captain, they are breaking through the eastern entrance." Rinaldi did not move. "Hold it. We cannot. There are hundreds." Rinaldi glanced at the corpse, then at Belandi. "You will come with me." "No," said Poirot. Every revolver in the room turned toward him. Poirot remained perfectly still. "Signor Belandi cannot leave." Rinaldi's smile disappeared. "Why not?" "Because the murderer is still in this room." No one spoke. Beyond the windows, the square erupted in a single vast roar. Poirot pointed to the blood on Elena Valenti's missing glove. That blood was there before Paolo Conti was shot. Elena's face went pale. Poirot continued. "Therefore another person was wounded before noon. Someone whose injury has not yet been discovered." A faint sound came from beneath the raised platform. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. Everyone turned. Poirot crossed the chamber and knelt beside the mayoral chair. Beneath the platform, concealed by a hanging strip of red cloth, was a narrow wooden door. The knocking came again. Rinaldi raised his pistol. Belandi whispered, "No." Poirot pulled the door open. A man lay inside the dark cavity, bound at the wrists, his shirt soaked with blood. He lifted his head. It was Professor Ricci. I stared back toward the gallery, where we had left the unconscious professor behind the pillar. Poirot's face became very grave. "Then, Hastings," he said, "the man downstairs is not Professor Ricci." Chapter 3. The Man Behind the Pillar. 12:48 p.m. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then Belandi crossed the chamber so quickly that he overturned a chair. "Alessandro!" The wounded man beneath the platform tried to answer, but only a dry sound came from his throat. Captain Rinaldi caught Belandi by the shoulder. "Do not touch him." Belandi struck his hand away. "He is dying." "He may also be armed. He is tied at the wrists." That has never prevented a man from being dangerous. Poirot knelt beside the opening. "Water, Hastings." I seized a glass from the council table and pushed through the men surrounding us. Ricci drank only a few drops before turning his face aside. His wound was high in the shoulder. Blood had soaked through his shirt and waistcoat, but the bullet did not appear to have reached the chest. "Who did this?" Belandi asked. Ricci's eyes shifted toward the side door. Rinaldi raised his pistol. "Who?" Ricci whispered one word, "Below." Then his head dropped. "He is alive," said Poirot, "but he must have a doctor immediately." Rinaldi gestured to two of his men. "Take him." "No," said Elena Valenti. The captain looked at her. "No?" "You will take him somewhere no one can question him." Rinaldi's scar tightened as he smiled. "You accuse me. I have not yet decided which accusation fits." Outside, another volley cracked across the piazza. The windows rattled. A councillor screamed and threw himself beneath a desk, although none of the bullets entered the room. Poirot rose. "We do not have time for accusations. Hastings, the false professor." We ran back toward the gallery. The stone pillar was empty. The man we had dragged there had disappeared. Only the cracked spectacles remained on the floor. I picked them up. He was unconscious. He was pretending. But Ricci called Belandi's name. He knew about the chamber. He knew enough to bring us upstairs. A red trail marked the stone beside the pillar. Blood. It continued toward the eastern corridor. Poirot followed it at once. The passage narrowed beyond the gallery and descended by a short flight of steps into an older part of the palace. The noise of the square became muffled behind thick masonry. Closed doors lined both sides of the corridor, each carrying a brass plate: archives, municipal accounts, public works. The blood trail stopped outside the records room. Poirot placed one finger to his lips. From behind the door came the sound of paper tearing. I reached for the handle. Poirot caught my wrist. He bent and examined the keyhole. Locked. A shadow moved beneath the door. Then came a metallic click. "Back!" I shouted. We threw ourselves aside as a bullet punched through the wood at chest height. I drew my revolver. "Hastings, no. He has just fired at us." "Yes. Do not reward his poor manners by killing him before he answers questions." Footsteps sounded inside. A window opened. I drove my shoulder into the door. The lock held. Again. The frame cracked, and on the third blow the door gave way. The records room was empty. Loose documents drifted across the floor. At the far end, a tall window stood open above an interior courtyard. A rope hung from the sill. I reached it in time to see a man descending rapidly. He wore Professor Ricci's coat, but his spectacles were gone. His hair, which had appeared grey in the square, now showed dark at the roots, where perspiration had washed away some kind of powder. He dropped the final few feet and disappeared beneath an archway. "I can follow him." Poirot was examining the papers on the floor. "No. We are letting him escape. He came here for something." A metal dispatch box stood open on the central table. Its lock had been forced. Most of its contents had been thrown aside, but one neat rectangular space remained empty among the bundled files. Poirot lifted a torn strip of paper. At the top was an official municipal seal. Beneath it, only half a sentence remained. Names of all persons authorized to carry arms inside the palace during the ceremony. "The list," I said. "Yes." "He stole it, or destroyed part of it." The door slammed behind us. Elena Valenti stood there, breathing hard. "Where is he?" "Gone," I said. She looked through the window and swore softly in Italian. Poirot held up the torn paper. You recognize this? No. You came here to obtain it. I came to stop Belandi from being killed. You carried blood on your glove before the first public shot. Her eyes hardened. I found Ricci beneath the platform. When? 11:45. And you left him there? He begged me to. Why? Because the man who shot him believed him dead. Poirot folded the paper. And who was that man? I did not see his face. Convenient. He wore a municipal guard's coat. Poirot's expression did not change. How did you enter the platform chamber? Elena hesitated. The rear panel was already open. And Paolo Conti? He found me there. The dead man in the council chamber? Yes, he told me to leave. Then Belandi appeared with the revolver. Why did Belandi have a revolver? Ask Belandi. I shall. A bell began ringing somewhere below us. Not the great palace clock, but a smaller alarm bell struck repeatedly and without rhythm. Elena turned pale. What is that? A man shouted from the corridor. Fire! Smoke entered beneath the door. It came quickly, black and oily, spreading across the stone floor. We ran into the corridor. At the far end, flames were already climbing the door of the municipal archives. 2 clerks struggled with buckets while others carried boxes away from the fire. Someone had piled furniture against the eastern stairwell, blocking the nearest route back to the council chamber. Deliberate, I said. Poirot touched the smoke-darkened wall. Very. A shot sounded below, then another. The clerks abandoned their buckets and fled. Through the smoke appeared a municipal guard carrying a rifle. His cap was pulled low. A white bandage covered his right hand. Eleanor gripped my arm. That is the coat. The guard saw her. He raised the rifle. I fired first. My bullet struck the wall beside his head. He dropped behind the stair rail and answered. Stone fragments cut my cheek. Poirot seized Elena and pulled her into a doorway. The guard retreated down the stairs. I followed. Hastings! But I had already reached the first landing. The smoke thickened below. I could hear the guard's boots striking the steps, then stopping. I descended carefully. Put down the rifle! No answer. At the bottom stood an open door leading into the courtyard. Daylight shone through the smoke. I stepped toward it. A hand came from behind the stair pillar and struck my wrist. My revolver fell. The false Professor Ricci seized my coat and drove me against the wall. Without the wig and powder, he looked no more than 35. He pressed a pistol beneath my jaw. Call Poirot. I said nothing. Call him. Poirot's voice drifted down through the smoke. You need not trouble Captain Hastings. I am here. The man turned his head, only slightly. It was enough. I struck his pistol arm upward. The shot fired into the ceiling. We crashed against the stair rail, struggling for the weapon. Then the man went limp. Eleanor stood behind him, holding a heavy brass fire nozzle. He will live, she said. We lowered him to the floor. Poirot removed the man's municipal coat. Underneath, pinned to his waistcoat, was a black ribbon bearing the emblem of a fascist squad. Rinaldi's men. I looked at Poirot. So Rinaldi sent him. Perhaps. Poirot searched the man's pockets and found the missing list from the dispatch box. Several names had been circled in blue pencil. Carlo Belandi, Paolo Conti, Professor Alessandro Ricci, Elena Valenti, and at the bottom, one final name, Hercule Poirot. The ink beside Poirot's name was still wet. Before we return to the story, a small word. Here on YouTube, we publish 2 nocturnal tales each week. If you would like a new mystery every night, our complete library now has a home of its own. 232 full-length mysteries, all in one place, free to listen to, with no adverts and no account. You will find it at nocturnaltalespodcast.com, and the link is waiting in the description. Now, back to tonight's story. Chapter 4. The List of the Living. 1:18 p.m. I stared at Poirot's name. That is impossible. Poirot touched the ink with the edge of his handkerchief. It is merely recent. You were not expected inside the palace. No. Which means the writer added me after seeing me in the square. Elena looked toward the unconscious man. He wrote it, perhaps. The false professor lay on the stone floor, blood running from a cut above his ear. Without the cracked spectacles and grey powder, his face was narrow and ordinary. The sort of face one might pass 100 times without remembering. Poirot searched him again. No papers, no identification. Only a pocket watch, a box of matches, a small key, and 3 cartridges. The watch had stopped at 11:57. Broken in the struggle? I asked. Poirot shook it gently. No damage. Elena crouched beside the man. I have seen him before. Where? I asked. In the offices of l'Avenir d'Italia, 2 weeks ago. He asked questions about Belandi. As a journalist? As a policeman. The alarm bell continued clanging above us. Smoke rolled down the staircase in heavy folds. Flames cracked somewhere beyond the corridor. Poirot stood. We cannot remain here. What about him? We take him with us. A sharp whistle sounded from the courtyard. Then another answered from the arcade beyond. Elena seized Poirot's arm. That is their signal. Whose? She did not answer. The unconscious man's eyes opened. His hand moved beneath his coat. I caught his wrist, but too late. He pulled a small glass vial from an inner pocket and crushed it between his teeth. Poirot struck his jaw, forcing his mouth open. A bitter almond smell rose immediately. Cyanide, I said. The man convulsed once, then stopped. Eleanor backed against the wall. He killed himself. No, said Poirot. You saw him. I saw him bite the vial. That is not the same thing. Poirot picked a fragment of glass from the man's collar. There was no label, no wrapping, nothing to prevent accidental breakage. Yet he carried it beside loose cartridges. What does that mean? It means someone wanted us to believe he was prepared to die. The courtyard door opened. Captain Rinaldi entered with 2 Blackshirts. He surveyed the corpse, the municipal coat, and the stolen list. His eyes settled on Poirot's name. This is becoming tiresome. You know this man? Poirot asked. No. He wore your emblem. So do thousands. Elena laughed. Convenient. Rinaldi ignored her. The eastern wing is burning. The crowd has broken into the lower offices. Belandi is missing. I stepped toward him. You left him in the council chamber. I left him under guard. Your guard? One of the palace soldiers. Poirot folded the list and placed it inside his coat. Rinaldi extended his hand. That belongs to the authorities. It belongs to the murderer. I will not ask twice. Poirot looked at the pistol in Rinaldi's hand. You have not asked once. You have only threatened. For a moment I thought Rinaldi would shoot him. Then the captain smiled. You English make courage look almost accidental. He is Belgian, I said. Rinaldi glanced at me. That explains the vanity. From above came a deafening crash. Part of the ceiling collapsed across the staircase, sending sparks and plaster into the passage. The Blackshirts retreated. Poirot pointed toward the courtyard. We leave now. The interior courtyard was narrow. surrounded on four sides by high windows and brick arches. Smoke poured from the eastern gallery. Papers fluttered from an upper floor like blackened birds. At the centre stood a stone well. Beside it lay a municipal guard. His throat had been cut. Eleanor stopped. "That is him." "The guard whose coat you saw?" I asked. "Yes." Poirot knelt beside the body. The dead man's right hand was bandaged. "He was not the man on the stairs," I said. "No, the bandage was transferred with the coat." Rinaldi swore under his breath. One of his men crossed himself. Poirot examined the dead guard's boots. They were wet with mud, although the courtyard stones were dry. "He came from outside," I said. "Recently." A narrow service door stood open behind the well. Beyond it, steps descended into darkness. Rinaldi aimed his pistol at the doorway. "He was brought through there." "Or came willingly," said Poirot. A shot cracked from an upper window. One of Rinaldi's men jerked backward and fell. The second Blackshirt fired upward blindly. "Stop!" Poirot shouted. Another shot struck the well. We scattered behind the arches. I looked toward the windows. Faces appeared and vanished through smoke. Clerks, councillors, armed men, perhaps merely frightened civilians. Any one of them might have fired. Rinaldi dragged his wounded man behind a pillar. "Which window?" "I did not see." Eleanor pointed. "Second floor, left of the broken shutter." I raised my revolver. Poirot caught the barrel. "No." "He is shooting at us." "Is he?" The wounded Blackshirt groaned. The bullet had entered high in his arm. Painful, but not fatal. Poirot looked at the mark on the well. The second bullet had struck several feet from where any of us stood. "Warning shots," he said. "From whom?" I asked. A voice called down from above. "Belandi is not the target." We looked up. A figure stood behind the broken shutter, obscured by smoke. Eleanor stepped into the courtyard. "Who is?" The figure fired once into the air, then disappeared. Almost immediately bells began ringing across the city, not ceremonially now, but urgently from several towers at once. The noise from the piazza swelled. Rinaldi rose. We moved through the passage. "You know where it leads?" Poirot asked. "To the western offices." "You said you had never been in this courtyard." Rinaldi's expression hardened. "I said no such thing." He pulled open the service door. A cold draught rose from the steps, carrying the smell of damp stone and gunpowder. Poirot looked at the muddy boots of the murdered guard, then at the darkness below. "He came through here." Rinaldi descended first. We followed. The steps led beneath the palace. The sounds of the riot faded behind thick walls, replaced by dripping water and the echo of our footsteps. Rinaldi's electric torch cut a narrow path through the darkness. The passage was old, perhaps medieval. Brick arches divided it into low chambers containing broken furniture, election posters, and crates of municipal records. After 20 yards, we found the first bloodstain. After 30, a second. At 40, the tunnel divided. One branch climbed toward the palace. The other continued beneath the square. Poirot stopped. On the ground lay a red silk thread. He picked it up. "Belandi's tie?" I asked. "No." Elena touched her collar. Her scarf was torn. "I came this way earlier." Rinaldi swung the torch toward her. "When?" "Before noon. You said you entered through the palace." "I said I found Ricci beneath the platform." Poirot held up the thread. "It is not from her scarf." He moved the torchlight toward the wall. A handprint had been made there in blood. Beneath it, scratched into the damp brick, were 4 words: "The 5th name is dead." I took out the stolen list. 5 names had been circled. Belandi, Conti, Ricci, Valenti, Poirot. Conti is already dead, I said. Poirot shook his head. The message does not say one of the 5 is dead. A faint ticking came from the darkness ahead. Regular, mechanical. Rinaldi raised the torch. At the end of the passage stood a wooden crate wired to an alarm clock. The minute hand pointed to 1:30. Poirot looked at his watch. 1:27. 3 minutes, I said. No, Hastings. Poirot's gaze moved to the wires running from the crate into both branches of the tunnel. Much less. Chapter 5. 2 minutes beneath Bologna. 1:27 p.m. The ticking seemed to fill the passage. Captain Rinaldi aimed the torch at the crate. 2 wires ran from the alarm clock into the brickwork, one toward the palace and the other beneath the square. "Can you stop it?" I asked. Poirot did not answer. He crouched several feet from the device, studying it without touching anything. Eleanor pressed herself against the wall. "We must go back." "No," said Rinaldi. "If the tunnel is wired, the exits may be trapped." "You are proposing we stand here?" "I am proposing that nobody moves until he tells us what we are looking at." Poirot inclined his head. "A rare moment of wisdom, Captain." The minute hand shifted. 1:28 p.m. Poirot pointed to the wire leading toward the square. "That is not connected to the bomb." "It enters the crate," I said. "It appears to." The wire passed through a drilled hole in the wood, but when Poirot leaned closer, he saw that it emerged again beneath the crate and continued into the floor. "A signal cable," said Rinaldi. "Perhaps." "And the second?" Poirot traced it with his eyes. It ran toward the palace branch and vanished behind a loose brick. "The second wire is attached to the clock." "So we cut it," I said. "No." Rinaldi gave a sharp laugh. "Your friend is very fond of that word." Poirot took the small key found on the dead impostor and held it beside the clock. The key was too small for the crate's brass lock. "It opens something else," I said. "Yes." The ticking continued. 1:29 p.m. From far above came a muffled detonation. Dust fell from the tunnel roof. Elena flinched. That was outside. "Another bomb?" I asked. "Or a grenade," said Rinaldi. Poirot remained focused on the clock. "Captain, remove your belt." Rinaldi stared at him. "You heard me." Rinaldi pulled off the leather belt and handed it over. Poirot looped it around the crate, passed the buckle through, and tightened it until the wood groaned. "What does that accomplish?" Eleanor asked. "If there is an explosive charge inside, very little." A silence followed. Poirot added, "But the crate is not the danger." The clock reached the half-minute. Poirot stepped toward the wall and placed his ear against the loose brick. Then he tapped it. Hollow. "Hastings, your knife." I handed it to him. He worked the blade into the mortar and levered out the brick. Behind it was a narrow cavity containing a telephone receiver. No bell, no dial, only the receiver and a single wire. Poirot lifted it. "Hello?" A man's voice answered faintly. 10. Everyone froze. 9. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" 8. Rinaldi seized the receiver. "Where are you?" 7. "Answer me." 6. The line went dead. Rinaldi threw the receiver aside. "Run!" Poirot blocked the tunnel. "No." 5 seconds. The clock still shows more than a minute. Then the count was for something else. "Yes." A metallic snap came from the darkness behind us. Rinaldi spun around. The passage door through which we had entered slammed shut. Then the lamps along the tunnel extinguished one by one. Darkness swallowed us. Someone moved. I heard fabric scrape against brick. "Do not fire," Poirot called. A pistol discharged. The flash illuminated Rinaldi for an instant, his weapon pointed toward Eleanor. She was no longer beside the wall. Another shot followed from the opposite direction. Rinaldi cursed. Poirot struck a match. The flame revealed Eleanor crouched beside the crate, holding the loose wire that ran beneath it. Her other hand was pressed to her side. Blood darkened her coat. "You have been hit," I said. "Not now." She opened her coat. Beneath it, wrapped around her waist, was a narrow leather document case. The bullet had struck the metal clasp. The blood came from a shallow wound beneath her ribs. Rinaldi raised his pistol. "What is in the case?" Elena drew a small automatic from her pocket. "Lower it." Poirot stepped between them. "No one will shoot anyone else." "She has been lying since the square," said Rinaldi. "So have you." The match burned down to Poirot's fingers. He dropped it and lit another. Several minutes must have passed. We haven't even noticed that the clock showed 1:30. The ticking ceased. Nothing happened. I let out a breath. "A bluff?" "No," said Poirot. From somewhere beneath our feet came the heavy clank of machinery. The floor trembled. Water began pouring into the tunnel. It entered through iron grills at the base of the walls, black and filthy, spreading around our boots. Rinaldi kicked the crate aside. Beneath it was a square metal plate set into the floor. The signal wire passed through its center. "A sluice," said Elena. "The old drainage system," Rinaldi replied. "You knew about it?" "I know the city." The water reached our ankles. Poirot pulled the wire. The metal plate shifted slightly. "Hastings, help me!" Together we lifted it. Beneath was not a drain, but a narrow shaft containing a lever and a second alarm clock. This one was running. "That controls the water?" I asked. "No," said Poirot. "It controls the door." Rinaldi aimed the torch into the shaft. Scratched beside the lever was a single word: Palazzo. "The palace branch," Elena said. "If we pull it, we open the route back." "Or detonate whatever is wired above us," said Rinaldi. The water reached our calves. From the blocked passage behind came hammering. 3 blows, a pause, then 3 more. Poirot listened. "Ricci." "How could you know?" I asked. "Because he knocked in the same rhythm beneath the platform," said Elena. The hammering continued. Rinaldi moved toward it. Poirot caught his arm. "No, it comes from beyond the sealed door. The water is rising on his side, too." "Then we open it." "The mechanism is connected to the second clock." The hands advanced. 32 seconds remained. Elena removed the leather case from beneath her coat. "Belandi gave me this." Rinaldi turned. "When?" "Last night." "What is inside?" "Names, payments, orders, the usual." "Give it to me." "No." Poirot held out his hand. Eleanor hesitated, then passed him the case. The small key from the impostor fit its clasp. Poirot opened it. Inside was a bundle of typed pages, tied with red cord. The top page bore no title. Only 5 initials appeared in the margin. CBPCAREVHP. My stomach tightened. "The same 5 names," I said. Poirot turned the page. The second sheet had been removed. Only a torn fragment remained beneath the binding. Rinaldi seized Elena by the arm. "Where is it?" I never opened the case. Then Belandi took it. Belandi locked it himself. The hammering behind the door became frantic. The water reached our knees. 16 seconds. Poirot examined the lever. "Captain, when this is pulled, the palace door opens." "You are certain?" "No." Rinaldi laughed bitterly. At last, honesty. "But the water will continue unless someone closes the sluice from the square branch." "That passage is flooded." "It will be." Eleanor looked at the two tunnels. "One of us must go beneath the square." "No," said Poirot. "That is what they expect." "Who?" "The person directing us." The clock showed 10 seconds. Poirot handed me the document case. Then he gripped the lever. "Whatever happens, do not lose this." 5 seconds. 4, 3. The hammering stopped. 2, 1. Poirot pulled the lever. A tremendous blast shook the tunnel. The passage toward the palace opened. At the same instant, the wall behind Elena split apart. A hidden doorway swung inward. Carlo Belandi stood beyond it, holding a smoking revolver. At his feet lay Professor Ricci. And behind Belandi, barely visible in the darkness, stood the man who had fired the first shot at noon. Chapter 6. The First Shot. The man behind Belandi was the false Professor Ricci. The grey powder had been washed from his hair, and the cracked spectacles were gone. He held a pistol in one hand and an electric torch in the other. I stared at him. "You were dead." "No, Hastings," said Poirot. "He merely smelled of almonds." Belandi's revolver shifted toward Poirot. "Give me the case." The tunnel water swirled around our knees. Behind us, the opened passage groaned beneath the pressure. Professor Ricci lay at Belandi's feet, one hand pressed to his wounded shoulder. A fresh bullet had torn through his sleeve, but he was conscious. "Do not give it to him," he whispered. Belandi kicked him silent. Elena raised her automatic. The impostor fired first. Her pistol flew from her hand and vanished into the water. Captain Rinaldi aimed at Belandi. "Tell your man to lower his weapon." Belandi laughed. "You brought armed squads into the square, Captain. Do not pretend you object to bloodshed now." Poirot stepped forward. "His name is Enrico Bassi." The impostor's eyes flickered. "Belandi's secretary disappeared 3 months ago," Poirot continued. "Officially, he went to Switzerland. In truth, he remained in Bologna, preparing today." Belandi pointed the revolver at Poirot's chest. "The case." "It is not mine." He looked at me. I still held the leather document case beneath my coat. Bassi moved toward me. Poirot raised one finger. "You may take it. But first you should ask why Signor Belandi placed your initials nowhere in those papers." Bassi stopped. Belandi's face tightened. "There are 5 sets of initials," Poirot said. "Carlo Belandi, Paolo Conti, Alessandro Ricci, Elena Valenti, Hercule Poirot, 5 people who were to be found responsible or dead when the palace fell into chaos." Bassi looked at Belandi. "And me?" "You, monsieur, were never intended to be found." "The water reached my thighs." Belandi said quietly, "Shoot him." Bassi did not move. Poirot's voice remained calm. "You impersonated Professor Ricci in the square. You delivered the warning. You murdered the municipal guard and wore his coat. You fired through the records room door. You carried the forged list and added my name after confirming that I had entered the palace." "The ink was wet," I said. "Yes. Belandi summoned me to Bologna, but he could not know whether I would reach the ceremony. Once I arrived, he authorized me to carry a weapon inside, not to protect me, to explain why a foreign detective might later be blamed for the shooting." Belandi's revolver rose. "The proof is the first shot." Outside, rifle fire rolled across the piazza. Poirot pointed toward Belandi's weapon. "At noon, you stood on the gallery and raised your revolver. When the lights failed, you entered the council chamber and shot Paolo Conti. I found him dead." "No. Paolo discovered that armed men from both factions had been admitted through entrances controlled by your agents. He warned Professor Ricci. Bassi shot Ricci before noon and hid him beneath the platform, but Paolo refused to remain silent." Poirot looked toward the wounded professor. Ricci knocked 3 times when he heard us because that was the signal agreed upon with Paolo. Ricci nodded weakly. Paolo was to open the panel, he said. He never came. Poirot continued. Belandi killed him at close range. That was the first shot inside the palace. It caused the armed men outside to believe the attack had begun. And the second shot? I asked. Bassi fired Paolo's pistol from the side doorway into the wall behind the mayoral chair. It created the appearance of a socialist assassin firing upon the council leadership. Elena stared at Belandi. You planned the reprisals. I planned nothing, Belandi said. You planned everything, said Poirot. The darkened palace, the false warning, the armed lists, the shot at the mayoral chair. Fascists would claim a socialist conspiracy. Socialists would claim a fascist assault. Each side would answer the other, and the truth would disappear beneath the dead. Rinaldi's expression had become cold. You promised me proof that the council intended to murder us. And he gave Elena proof that your squads intended to murder the council, said Poirot. The same sealed case, the same invented conspiracy, prepared for whichever survivor proved useful. Elena looked at the document case in my hands. He told me to deliver it to the newspapers if anything happened to him. After your body was found with it, said Poirot, the papers would have made you part of the plot. Bassi turned on Belandi. You said we would leave together. Belandi shot him. The bullet struck Bassi beneath the ribs. He staggered against the hidden doorway, his face showing more surprise than pain. Rinaldi fired. Belandi's revolver spun from his hand. I lunged for Bassi's pistol as he fell. He tried to raise it, but the rising water dragged at his arm. I struck it away and pulled him clear of the doorway. Belandi ran. He vanished through the hidden passage. Poirot followed. Hastings! We plunged after him. The passage climbed steeply toward a narrow stone chamber beneath the square. Above us came the thunder of hundreds of feet. Belandi reached an iron ladder leading to a trapdoor. He climbed. Poirot stopped below. You cannot open it. Belandi pushed against the trapdoor. It did not move. The crowd is standing upon it, Poirot said. Belandi struck it with both fists. Move! The roar above continued. The people in the piazza could not hear him. Water poured into the chamber behind us. Belandi descended slowly. His confidence had gone. Without the revolver, without Bassi, he appeared suddenly old. You cannot prove that I fired. Poirot looked at Belandi's torn collar. Paolo seized you before you killed him. Beneath his fingernails will be fibers from your shirt. Belandi said nothing. Your revolver contains one discharged chamber. The bullet in Paolo will match it. Bassi fired the second weapon, but he did not kill Paolo. He will deny everything. From the passage behind us came Bassi's voice. No. He stood supported between Elena and Rinaldi, one hand pressed to his wound. Belandi stared at him. You are a dead man. Bassi smiled faintly. That was always your plan. The floodwater stopped rising. Somewhere behind the wall, the old sluice mechanism shuddered and closed. Professor Ricci had reached the control. Poirot took Belandi by the arm. The phrase scratched into the tunnel was not a prophecy. The fifth name is dead. It was an instruction. Once I had been added to the list, Bassi was to ensure that I did not leave the palace to contradict your story. Belandi looked toward the ceiling as another volley tore across the square. You have solved nothing, he said. Listen to them. It has already begun. He was right. Men were dying above us. No deduction could recall a bullet or silence a mob once fear had given it permission to kill. Poirot's grip tightened. I have not stopped the crime, he said, but I have prevented you from owning the truth afterward. We led Carlo Belandi back toward the palace. Behind us, beneath the Piazza Maggiore, the false clock continued to show the minute at which 5 people were meant to die, and a lie was meant to become history. Epilogue. The real events behind the story. The events in this story were inspired by the Palazzo da Curzio massacre, one of the defining episodes of the violent political conflict that engulfed Italy after the First World War. On November 21, 1920, Bologna's newly elected Socialist administration gathered in the Palazzo da Curzio, the medieval city hall overlooking Piazza Maggiore, to take office. The Socialist Party had won municipal elections across much of northern Italy, while Benito Mussolini's fascist movement was rapidly expanding and increasingly willing to use organized violence against its political opponents. Thousands gathered in the square outside the palace. Socialist supporters celebrated the new council, while fascist squads arrived to challenge the ceremony. The authorities attempted to keep the rival groups apart, but the situation quickly deteriorated. Exactly how the violence began remains a matter of historical debate. Shots were fired both inside and outside the palace. Panic spread through the crowded square as soldiers, police, fascists, and armed socialists all became involved. During the confusion, members of the Socialist Red Guard inside the council chamber mistakenly fired into the crowd of socialist supporters below after believing the building was under attack. At the same time, exchanges of gunfire erupted in the piazza between fascists, security forces, and armed civilians. When the shooting finally ended, at least 10 people had been killed and dozens more wounded, making it one of the bloodiest episodes of Italy's Biennio Rosso, the 2 red years of intense strikes, political unrest, and street violence between 1919 and 1920. The tragedy had consequences far beyond Bologna. Each political faction blamed the other. The massacre became powerful propaganda for both the fascists and their opponents, further deepening the atmosphere of fear and revenge that gripped the country. Rather than discouraging political violence, it helped normalize it. Within 2 years, fascist squads had grown dramatically in strength, culminating in the March on Rome in October 1922, and Benito Mussolini's appointment as Prime Minister. Unlike the fictional mystery you have just heard, there was never a single hidden mastermind whose arrest could have prevented the bloodshed. The tragedy resulted from a deadly combination of political extremism, armed militias, mutual distrust, poor coordination by the authorities, and decisions made in moments of panic. That complexity is precisely why historians continue to study the Palazzo da Curzio massacre more than a century later. It stands as a sobering reminder that when politics becomes a battlefield, truth is often the first casualty, and ordinary people are usually the next. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of the 12th stroke. This was a mystery in which the murder mattered, but the story told afterward mattered even more. What gives the case its particular darkness is the attempt to manufacture history while events are still unfolding. Lists are prepared, identities are borrowed, shots are arranged, and every faction is given just enough evidence to confirm what it already fears. Once the violence begins, truth no longer has to be convincing. It only has to arrive later than the accusation. Poirot can expose the man who tried to control the meaning of the bloodshed, but he cannot undo the panic above him. That is perhaps the most unsettling part of the story. A detective may identify the first shot, the forged document, or the hidden hand behind a conspiracy. Yet once fear has spread through a crowd, reason must compete with something much faster. If you stayed for the epilogue, you know that the real events at the Palazzo da Curzio were even more complex. There was no single mastermind arranging every bullet. Political extremism, armed factions, confusion, mutual suspicion, and panic combined to produce a tragedy that each side immediately reshaped into its own version of the truth. If this mystery stayed with you, tell us in the comments which part felt most dangerous. The man planning the violence, the factions waiting for an excuse, or the certainty with which everyone believed they already knew who was responsible. If you would like to hear more tonight, our complete library is waiting on our own website. 232 full-length mysteries, free, with no adverts and no account, at nocturnaltalespodcast.com. And if these stories have become part of your evening, you will find a support page there too. A few dollars a month keeps them free for everyone, and it keeps us independent of any platform. Every link is in the description. For now, thank you again for staying with us to the last line. Until the next case, distrust any story prepared before the crime is finished. Beware of those who profit from panic. And remember, when politics becomes a battlefield, truth is often the first casualty.